Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this talk, which is about data protection in web development made easy. My name is Amelia Andersdotter. I've been working politically in the European Parliament and in or around Brussels for around 4 years, including for a long time with data protection. For much of that time, actually, I've also been cooperating with Anders, who has developed, first of all, my website in 2009, leading up to the then European election campaigns. And then afterwards, we also collaborated while I was in the European Parliament. We were in the same office for at least 6 months. And so Anders is clearly the technical expertise in our team. The way that our cooperation has developed over time is mostly, I think, of some form of political implication that we need to get past, which is privacy related, and Anders figures out a way to implement it in whichever website platform we're using at a time. So after about 5 years of knowing each other, or almost 6, we now have quite a lot of experiences with how do we deal with political complaints related to privacy. So we can go to the next slide. Privacy is conventionally protected in Europe. The European Convention of Human Rights, which was formed in the 1950s, it gives everyone the right to respect for private lives and the private sphere. I apologize for the non-gender neutral hiss in this quote, but it's actually a quote from the convention. It's probably due to the residual conservatism in society of the 50s. The right to privacy is meant to protect your right to form your own identity. It's about being able to control not only who you are, but also who you become. And to know who is trying to influence you and to shape your personality and your personal development at which instances over time. It's not just about keeping stuff secret, and we can go to the next slide, I guess, for that. But I want to make a distinction between data protection and data security. Data security is when you have an IT system and you're dealing with personal data or any kind of data, and you're doing so in a predictable, foreseen way. You build your system, it works in the way that you intended. This is security. Data protection goes beyond that, because it's not only about having something work as you intended it to, it's also about having it work in a particular way which enables the people that you interact with to foresee these influences that may be imposed upon them by actors outside of them. So we can go to even the next slide. The European Commission has been making new data protection proposals since 2012. Some of you may have heard about it. It's been the issue of a lot of contentious debates, especially around the IT industry, because it's quite comprehensive, and it's also meant to update data protection rights in Europe for, well, the new developments that we see with big data, with lots of websites, web profiling, and marketing. I will not talk so much about the details of the law because I don't think that they're very interesting, but I will talk about the principles that go behind it. So we have this human right, which is we need to be able to control who we become. How do we ascertain that we find these principles? Well, we give individuals the right to know. Who is trying to find out stuff about me and who's trying to influence me? The right to know is extremely important. When do things go wrong? Do we have security breach notifications for targeting individuals when something goes wrong in the system? Do we help people protect themselves when things go wrong or when things don't go wrong? Do we give people good choices? The second choice is the right to consent. Do we give people actually meaningful ways of saying, yes, I want to be influenced in this way, or no, I do not want to be influenced this way when we deal with their personal data? The European Commission has clearly tried to shift also the legislation to user-centrism, meaning that rather than having institutions, organizations, or companies making choices on behalf of individuals, we actually target the individuals themselves. There's an important principle of data minimization, which I think has important privacy and security implications at the same time. So even if I say they're not always congruent, clearly with data minimization, you can't leak information that you don't have. And also, the less information you have about somebody, the less easily you can covertly influence them. Data minimization means that you don't use any more data for any particular task than you absolutely need. and it's also been incorporated in the National Standards Institute of the United States recommendations for good data security practices. So this is an extremely important principle to be applying when you're dealing with personal data, at least. The fifth principle, which is not actually a principle, but it's anyway important, is the European Commission and the European Parliament actually confirmed that we need effective sanctions against companies or entities or government authorities that don't follow the law. And this might seem obvious if you don't comply with the law and if you don't protect human rights of people in Europe, you should be somehow held accountable for that. But it's actually not been part of the legislation up until now. In previous legislation in the European Union, it was common that the max penalties could be something like 20,000 euros for, and this is like the absolute max that you can get for infringing privacy rights in a European country. 20,000 euros for a big company like Google or Amazon, or even for a public authority, it's not much. It's certainly not enough to be deterring undesirable behavior, let's say. Our particular project, but that we will be looking at today, is our investigation of public sector websites in Sweden. The reason that we've targeted public sector websites initially is because we have, our organization is small, we're only 2 people. The public sector additionally doesn't suffer from a lot of complications like marketing models or business incentives. They get all of their money already from tax revenues. And so the public sector normally has many fewer incentives to be part of involuntary tracking schemes against citizens than other actors that you might find. Our focus was, can you visit your municipality online in Sweden without reporting it to a third party? Can you do so without giving up lots of personal data? And how does the municipality relate to you as a visitor to their website in terms of, do they consider themselves having the right to steer you, or are they providing you a website so that you can more easily steer them, as it were? It turns out that actually it's not particularly easy to visit Swedish municipalities without getting tracked. There's only 2 municipalities out of 290 in total that do not disclose information to third parties that you have visited their website. They do so by using ancillary services like text-to-voice applications, but of course the much more common tool that they use is web analytics. 233 out of 290 municipalities in Sweden basically force visitors to their website to tell Google where they've been, what they read, for how long, and how they got there. Not very encouraging results, except it's at least not zero. This is a list of all of the laws that you can entertain yourself with if you're desperately interested in the legislation of the European Union on this field. I have decided not to focus on it because I really think that the 5 principles at the base of the legislation are a lot more important. So, considering the fact that we want to build a community where everyone has the right to form their own identities, make good democratic choices as citizens, and that this is kind of a condition for having democracy work to begin with, that everyone is able to understand why they're making choices and why they are the way they are. The right to know, the right to consent, putting your user in the center, and by user I mean not your client, but actually the individual citizen that will eventually visit the website, and applying data minimization. These are much more important than anything that you can find in these laws, because they're anyway mostly exception handling. This will be available online. If you're extremely curious, you can go to our website and find it there. But without delaying much longer, I was going to let Anders talk a bit about the technical experiences that we made and some recommendations for how you can easily implement data protection features in your website when you go out to build websites in the future.
Right, so there are actually quite a few things you can do to data protection. But the 2 basic principles to start with: encrypt as much as possible, as often as possible, and don't tell other people about your visitors unless you actually have consent. Like HTTPS, for example, is important not just for online banking or checking Facebook and Gmail, but it could also be that the mere fact that you're visiting a certain page is in itself sensitive. So, for example, here's a page from entails.uk. It's the website of England's public healthcare system, National Health Service, the largest health website in the UK. A page about domestic violence. And as you can see, well, apart from ghostly telling me that, well, the website is telling some other people about my reading this page, you can also see that they don't use encryption on this page and most pages on the website. So what this means is, of course, that the traffic going from my computer back and forth to their server is like postcards being sent back and forth. So this is what anyone with access to network traffic could see. Well, the exact page you're reading and browser info and cookies, etc. The observer or attacker could be, well, your school, your workplace, government, maybe a three-letter agency, or perhaps your, I don't know, abusive psychopathic spouse and Google how to install a packet sniffer. Because, you know, spying on network traffic isn't exactly rocket science. Now, and I just used HTTPS instead. This is all the attacker would have seen. All the headers are HTTP headers or encrypted, and only the server name is sent unencrypted as part of the TLS handshake. So in this case, the observer can see that you've been to a page on NHS.uk, but not which page, and that's a crucial difference. Like, the person doesn't know if you're reading about the flu or looking up your nearest pharmacy opening hours, if you're reading about domestic violence or suicide or HIV. HTTPS doesn't offer perfect pricing. It could be possible for a more resourceful attacker to determine what page you're looking at through traffic analysis, but it's like compared to insecure connections, like day and night. Right, so the SSL business is still a racket, but these certificates have become cheaper. And in November, the Let's Encrypt project, sponsored by EFF and Mozilla and several others, will finally make certificates free and automated for all. It's really cool. You can actually get it going. If you do use HTTPS, I suggest you turn on HSTS, which is Restricted Transport Security. This is basically your server telling the user's browser to only connect to your site through SSL for a specified amount of time. And this protects against 9/11 attacks and other things. So, next up, refers. So usually whenever you click on a link or you visit a page that loads external stuff like CSS or JS, the refer header is sent to the other server. This is the full URL of the page you're at. So, for example, if we, on the same NHS.uk page, scroll down and then click on the link to Facebook, your browser will happily tell Facebook that we're just reading about domestic violence. As you can see in the bottom here, which is, oh, you might not want Facebook to know what you've been reading. It's kind of creepy. And you have no idea what if they do something with this data or what they might do with it. Thankfully, there are now some ways to avoid this. HTML5 introduced the no refer link type. It basically tells the browser when I click on this link, don't send refer information. Very simple. And this is in the official HTML5 implementation and is supported by all the major browsers except Explorer, of course. Although I think it is supported by the new Windows 10 browser. I'm not sure. So this only applies to A and I think area elements. And it's kind of annoying to add this all links and so what about all the other stuff like CSS or JS images? Because every page, every request that's generated by a page, of course, has a refer header, normally. Turns out there's a newer development called refer policy. which allows you to specify a policy that is applied to all the requests generated by the page. So all the links clicked, all the CSS, JS images loaded. So just this one single line can measurably improve privacy today. Because it's actually supported by latest Firefox, Chrome, Safari, and even Microsoft Edge, the new Windows 10 browser. It's really cool. Soon you can also do this on an element level, at least for A elements. So for example, you could have a policy that says don't leak refer information ever, except for certain whitelisted sites, perhaps. Right, now, so you got your SSL going and you stop leaking refers. Next, well, all the third-party stuff. One of the worst offenders is, of course, Google Analytics. As Amelia said, it's kind of, well, generally it's pretty hard to browse the internet without telling Google about most of your visits. And certainly this is true for visiting your municipality if you happen to live in Sweden. The vast majority use Google Analytics, so yeah, tell Google if you visit your government website. Of course, Google Analytics is extremely useful and very important for a lot of people for various reasons. But there is an alternative. The best one, I think, at the moment being Peewee. It's very much like Google Analytics, but it's totally open source, PHP, MySQL. And you can run it on your own server, so you are in control of the data. And it also has various privacy options, like you can decide how much you want to mask IP addresses. You can let users opt out. You can delete detailed user data for a certain amount of days. And you can use it without cookies, which is not possible with Google Analytics. Of course, then you lose some precision and some features, but it's still quite functional. An even more radical alternative could be that, well, maybe you don't need to always track people just because you can. Just food for thought. Third-party comment platforms are another kind of worms, like Discuss or embedded Facebook comments. Of course, very easy to use, and that's very attractive. But I would urge you to consider the privacy implications here. Discuss, for example, doesn't allow anonymous comments. They claim extremely broad rights on all the posts, or all the comments posted. And of course, they are in control of all your comments. And they also share user data, sell it to various third parties in different ways. And of course, if you use Discuss, if a user visits your site, he or she is immediately exposed to Discuss just by loading their files in JavaScript. And a lot of people might not even realize that when they post a comment on your website, they're not posting the comment to you technically, but to a third party, which brings up all kinds of issues. There are, well, depending on your needs, you could use the plain old built-in Drupal comment system, perhaps. There are some Discuss-like clones, like ISO and Hashover, that you can run on your own server. And or you could use more sophisticated forum software like Discourse or Vanilla, which both have Drupal modules for integration. Yet another way of tracking people is the official like and share tweet buttons on Facebook and Twitter and so on. They, as you might have read in the news for the last few years, it allows Facebook and others to track people, even people who don't even use Facebook. It's kind of creepy, especially since you see them everywhere. What you can do instead is you can use either static links, images, or you can use icon fonts like Font Awesome, construct links manually. Or perhaps a two-click solution like this example from the blog of Bruce Schneier, where initially the social stuff is disabled, so nothing is actually loaded from Twitter or Facebook until you hit the toggle. So you have to click once to activate, to expose yourself to Facebook and Twitter, and click again to like tweet, which is kind of neat. And there are several implementations of this. We have them on the page that you'll see a link to soon. Same thing with fonts. If you use Google Fonts, unless you follow my recommendation of using the meta refer thing from before, you're again telling them what the users. I use this as an example. I check out the suicide prevention website. They use Google Fonts, so of course they tell fonts.googleapis.com that I was listing this preventing suicide / find help page. So it's kind of creepy still. What you can do instead, except for using the meta refer thing, is self-host. Some font services, like I think Typekit, actually provide like ready-made packages for self-hosting. For Google Fonts, you can. There are some tools and services to like select the fonts you want, and then you can download the font in all the different versions or styles, and generate the proper CSS. You can just upload it, and here we go. So to summarize there are lots of things you can do with pricing. This is just the beginning, but talk all day. But to start with, encrypt all the time. Stop leaking first, and don't tell other people about your visitors unless they actually have consented. And self-host when possible. It's easier than you think.
Right, so this presentation is not about how to protect yourself against the National Security Agency or the GCHQ. It's about how everyone can be excellent to each other and help each other protect our human rights and uphold the kind of democratic traditions that we want. Some of the advice that we presented, I hope that you will have use for in your practical experiences. And also, I would like to rephrase some of the issues around tracking and tracing users online. A lot of this is done for commercial purposes, of course, like particularly in advertisement. But one question which I think a lot of people don't ask themselves often when they're web developing is, do visitors on a website actually have an obligation to be tracked in order to help the web developer make a better website? It was a question that came up when we were previously presenting at WordCamp Europe for WordPress developers. Many times analytics tools are used to improve the website, but it's important to know that there are no legal obligations on individuals in Europe or elsewhere to help web developers make better websites. On the contrary, in the European Union, we have legal obligations on web developers to assist users in not having to help out unless they want to. And I think it always helps when you're designing a tool that other people need to use to think about, am I framing any kind of implicit duties or obligations on other people? And should I be doing that? Or could I be solving this in some other way, which helps everyone make better platforms and have a better web experience? I would like to conclude with individuals matter. Clearly, this is kind of the basic idea of our entire democratic construct. Unless we can make free choices, we cannot make free elections, and then we don't have all of these political freedoms that we normally associate ourselves as having. It's also possible to protect privacy. I think some of the measures Anders has been describing, they require some extra amount of work, but it's not that much extra work. And if everyone gets into the routine of doing them, then certainly we will have, at some point in the future, automated tools that makes it easier for everyone. We would like to welcome you to join us in building a better web with more privacy for all users. And we hope that you've enjoyed our presentation.
Also,
yeah, no, well,
yeah, on this page we have various links and references to things we talk about. and some Drupal specific ideas because we use Drupal ourselves for our website. So check it out.
We have to put that last. Now we have also, as you can see, a Q&A, so if you have any particular questions that were raised during the presentation, please take this opportunity.
Yeah, lots of time.
You mentioned cookie law, which is a controversial thing, to put it mildly. What are your perspectives on that? Do you think it's in its current implementation? Is it okay? Is it necessary, or can it be tuned? Or
Okay, so there are policy implications and technical implications of the cookie law. It's one of the things where Anders and me have been collaborating to develop, in fact, websites that do not use cookies. Dataskydd.net does not set any cookies on users, even when we comment, right? Yeah. So even commenting doesn't actually set a cookie on the user in the user's browser. Can they click something to make it occur? Well, we don't know. Well,
really.
yeah. So it's possible to develop without cookies. This is not one of these, it's not a God-given right of web developers to set cookies on in other people's browsers. The European legislation doesn't actually mention cookies other than kind of implicitly. What it says is that you're not allowed to track people without their implicit consent. And then it says in the law also that you cannot track people by, for instance, cookies or by spyware. But the legislator has emphasized spyware, so they didn't actually technically say that cookies were the bad thing. But the problem, of course, with the cookie legislation is that the entire advertisement industry wants to track people a lot without their consent. And the advertisement industry also knows that people would never consent to be tracked a lot. Most users don't want to be tracked. They consider their visits to the municipality or the suicide help prevention line as confidential for some reason, and don't click the yes button when you say, would you like to report this to Google or Visit or Adatona. And so the advertisement industry is also very good at advertisement, which is why, and marketing, which is why the law has become a bad name. We have in the European Union shameful oversight of this legislation. We first of all have 28 different implementations in all the member states, which is horrible to begin with. The European Commission has been relying on the advertisement industry to self-regulate since 2009, but clearly an industry will not be self-regulating in a way that it perceives to be contrary to its own interests. So the European Commission really should have been more diligent in, for instance, following, the referred policy standard developments at the World Wide Web Consortium. They were invited at multiple times to the do not track standardization procedure at the World Wide Web Consortium as well, and didn't care about it at all. The only European representation in the do not track proceedings was Rob van Eyck from the Data Protection Authority of the Netherlands, but because he was politically marginalized by the European Commission and his other colleagues from other member states, of course, he wasn't eventually able to be very effective in making sure that that standard became a way of implementing the cookie legislation. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with the law necessarily, but we definitely have a problem with the oversight. The European Commission has been disastrous on this. There was also a very quick and strong media campaign from the advertisement industry against the legislation, which I think presents the legislation in a worse way than is necessary. Because ultimately, it's down to this. Do you consider your visitors having an obligation to help you improve your website? Do internet users in general have an obligation to assist the marketing industry? And I don't think it's useful to codify in law such an obligation, because we're not actually obliged. We don't have a duty to help the marketing industry, and it makes sense to make that our choice as individuals if we want to do that. And this is what the legislator tried to do with the law, but where the legislator kind of failed. That said, we were looking actually at, we had a problem with cookies on not on dataskydd.net, but on my former website.
Yeah, Drupal 7 still says this minimum has JS cookie, which is actually more than Drupal 8, I think.
Yeah, so right now if you make a...
So you have to modify this/Drupal.js menu and more patches.
Yeah, but if you use Drupal 8, apparently you can make, you call it the clean install with no add-ons, right?
I had to check it, but they didn't kill this.
Right, so Drupal 8 is not meant to be if you can just install Drupal 8 and you don't use any add-ons, probably then it will not set a cookie on your users, even a session cookie. So that's very helpful for developers because it means you don't have to hack your platform before you start not following the law. So there are some positive developments in that.
Well, you obviously mentioned advertisement oriented enterprises, which are certainly the boogeyman. But isn't there an implication for small and medium-sized businesses who use the same technologies to create their websites, for example on WordPress and things like that, which by default set cookies? Aren't they implicated by the law by default? In Estonia, I would say that if the interpretation of the law is that a website is required to notify the user about the use of cookies, I think 99% of Estonian websites are guilty of not notifying the user. Doesn't that kind of take away from the effect of the law, or doesn't it marginalize the law because it's 99% of websites don't abide by it?
Yes, it does marginalize the law. A law which is effectively not cared about by the oversight authorities, which in this case, I guess, I don't know if in Estonia it's the telecommunications agency or the data protection agency, but you know, if the public authorities don't care to enforce the law, and the industry clearly does not also care about enforcing the law, but instead ridicules it, then that law is likely to be marginalized. That's entirely correct. But that said, the spirit of the law, and I will maintain this, the spirit of the law is fine. We do not have an obligation to help marketeers or anyone else, and it makes perfect sense for us to be informed and make a choice if we want to assist the marketing industry in selling ads, or if so, in which way we want to do that. And this is what the law says, that we should be having that choice. And then it's up, I guess, to all of us to ensure that these choices are realized for private persons. At some point, I guess it's also down to individual web developers or companies or persons to decide, do we believe that this is a good value framework? Do we believe it's good not to implicitly oblige people to do a lot of things that they don't understand what they are without giving them a choice? Or do we not believe that that's a good idea for kind of the larger framework? And then we all need to help each other over time to understand, when are we imposing these obligations? How can we refrain from imposing such obligations on people? It's clearly not something that the government can just dictate and punish people into doing in one go. It's a mutual responsibility of all of us to ensure that we have a framework and a web which protects the rights of everyone and makes society as free, choice-wise as possible.
Yes. Talking about data protection and privacy, what is your point of view regarding the e-residency concept being implemented here in Estonia, since we're talking about governmental entities? So how do you foresee this evolution of this?
I find the e-residency project interesting. I don't know enough about technical specifications, I will say, to make any crazy conclusions. What I do know, and because I actually talked to the Estonian government about this at some point when I was working in Brussels, is that normally the security practices in Estonia are very good. So the Estonian government is typically quite transparent to citizens about security problems. They help people, undertake measures to protect themselves. And then there's the other aspect, which is that in Estonia and the Baltic states, kind of generally, it seems that these data protection kind of split identity things that they have, for instance, in Germany, aren't very implemented. So Estonians, the Estonian e-government projects tend to collect all of the data about all of the interactions by citizens with any public authority in just the one place, which I think in Germany would be unconstitutional and unthinkable, completely, not possible at all for historical reasons. And so I don't think that I don't think that the e-residency project necessarily has the chance to become a European-wide project. And I also don't think that the Estonian EID systems, where you have like one card to do everything, can ever become a European system because the constitutional frameworks of a lot of member states would just simply not allow it. But that said, they're interesting. And in particular, I would hope that more governments in Europe pick up on some of the security practices of the Estonian government, because a lot of European states are much more keen on keeping security concerns very secret and occluded from private citizens, and I don't think that this is a very constructive way to go forward in building trust and confidence in electronic systems.
Sorry if I can intrude. I was just saying to my colleague that he should hold me back, but he failed. There are some issues with the e-residency project because, for example, if you create a company here in Estonia, in the business registry, you basically have to provide your company's email address to the business registry. Now, that's public data. So that's data that the government will sell to marketers and third parties. But to anybody. Basically to anybody. So in that sense, things are not perfect. Hopefully that will go away, and I hope that having the e-residency program will influence it somewhat, because I think people who will have e-residency are technologically advanced and don't want their email addresses sold to spammers. But it's a controversial subject, and I was recently kind of got a bit of a thrashing from project leaders when I took the issue up. So before you submit your data to an Estonian authority, you also have to consider that it may be published in some way. So keep your mind open to that in that sense.
Yep.
I have a question about this Drupal 8 and if it complies to your standards of privacy. And you said that without plugins it probably will not install any cookies in your computer, and that's good, but does it have other problems? And
I haven't actually checked Drupal 8.
Okay, and like extra question about this would be like, you're speaking about something like let's be nice to each other, let's like be excellent and help each other, but is it enough to make some change in this privacy field? Like, for example, if you have all these Drupal plugins that you can use, shouldn't be there some sort of I don't know, standard process to review them for privacy if they help privacy or not? Have you talked about it somewhere? Is it possible to make it this way? Because law is hard to change, and this enforcement process, I think. But yeah, any comments on that?
Well, we don't have the technical resources to, I think, review, or we haven't had the technical resources yet. This is essentially our technical resource to review Drupal 8, as we said. Now, would it be good if there was a standardized way of measuring privacy compliance? Yes, that would be excellent, in fact. That would be extremely good. But there is no such project, and in Sweden, much like in Estonia, the government makes huge profits from selling personal data to marketeers. Several public authorities, in fact, do this. And so what Anders and me concluded was that it would be too arduous, like it's just too much of a burden to lobby the government to lose a lot of income. So that's why we're targeting municipalities instead, and we're hoping that municipalities, we've been working with some municipalities, apart from these 2 municipalities that are in fact already in compliance with privacy legislations. There's also been like 1 or 2 more municipalities that are interested in remaking their website to be more privacy compliant. And so knowing that you can, for instance, recommend somebody to use Drupal 8 because it gives you a clean sheet to start from, so that at least whenever there's more complications, you know what they are, there's nothing wrong with the platform, is very helpful for talking with municipalities. But then we're hoping to build it bottom up from there. Also because then you lack some of the commercial complications, like if you went for the news websites, for instance, they would immediately talk about revenue, which is a very complicated issue to discuss in any kind of context, but municipalities don't suffer from this problem. So we've tried to reduce the scope of our activities to actors that clearly have an interest in upholding human rights, that don't have any incentives not to do so, and that presently seem to be having lots of very big problems that are very simple to fix. Now, does it help to fix stuff a little at a time? I have to believe yes. I really have to believe that if you're going to fix any kind of problem, you have to fix it a little at a time, because otherwise we end up in the situation with the cookie law, that something is kind of technically, legally fixed, but actually it's not fixed at all in the European context and nobody's taking responsibility for it. So I would like to believe that we can all make the world a slightly better place every day, and this is also why I'm here, to invite more people to help me and Anders with that endeavor. We would also happily accept help from anyone who's interested in reviewing, of course, modules and plugins for privacy purposes. So if anyone has strong feelings about this and wants to be helpful for building a more data-protected web, then please don't hesitate to be in touch with us, and I'm sure we can collaborate constructively around that.
I have a question about the comment section that you mentioned there. That, for instance, this is bad because they do not allow anonymous commenting. But let's say hypothetically that you are responsible for a very high visitor count news site. How would you actually then allow commenting? Because let's say in Estonia, anonymous commenters are pretty mean to each other. So there's nothing constructive going on in most of the news article comments. So how would you fix it? What would be the solution?
I don't see a difference between using Discuss or your own stuff. If we're just talking about shitty comments.
No, what I meant was that in Estonia some news sites have anonymous comments and they don't really work because people just insult each other. But in Finland, you need to register yourself, put your face, proper image, and basically proper name. So when you say something, they can basically look you up in phone book and call the cops or something.
In Sweden, people have been saying pretty spiteful stuff, even through their Facebook accounts with picture and name attached. So only de-anonymizing the users does not seem to mean that people stop hating. And we have similar data from the US or from the UK that people say surprising stuff online. And some of it is really nasty, and it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with anonymity instead.
I guess it must be a country difference, because in Estonia, when they put a face and name next to you, then the people shut up. But maybe in Sweden they're not used to being frank and direct, but at least in Estonia it doesn't work that way.
I think it's a question of relative anonymity. So Estonia is very small. There's like 1,000 what's it, 1.3 million
Yeah,
people in
everybody
the
knows
entire
somebody,
country.
right?
So, right. So if you say something nasty to somebody else, the chances are that you're actually friends with their cousin at least. Iceland would have similar issues. Whereas in Sweden, if you live I live in the south of Sweden, and Anders lives in Stockholm, and if I insult somebody from Stockholm, the chances that Anders knows that person is actually quite small. So anonymity in Sweden is easier to achieve even when you have a name and a face to somebody. And in even larger countries like Germany, you can quickly see how identification doesn't help at all, because people don't, there's 82 million Germans, they can't all know each other. That said, there's something else with the Discuss platform which is actually quite interesting, and was a case from Estonia with Delphi, that is an Estonian news platform, I think. Yeah, so they went to the European Court of Human Rights, which is not European Union related at all, actually. But they went there, and the European Court of Human Rights said that Delphi is responsible for spiteful comments on their website, targeting a company, which I thought was the most bizarre part of that. Like, how can you insult morally a company, actually? But anyway, so the court has said that, and I can't stop them, clearly, and neither could anyone else. And it means that websites actually have a responsibility to ensure that people can't unlawfully hate each other online, which creates liability issues. Now, platforms like Discuss can help website owners shift liability from European jurisdiction into American jurisdiction. Because when Discuss becomes responsible for the comments, then in the US, there is legislation that says Discuss can never be responsible for what any users say on the Discuss platform. And because IT law is written in such a way that it deals with kind of registers, not with websites, but with registers. Actually incorporating the Discuss register on your website means it's not the same register as the one you already have, which it would be if you used the built-in platform. And so there's a possibility that you could escape liability for spiteful comments by using Discuss and arguing that the register of Discuss is in the US and therefore it's not under my control and I'm not liable for whatever is in there. And that's an interesting problem. My hypothesis is that this registry construction of the law will actually change over time. That European courts will eventually start finding that it doesn't matter if the register on your website is in fact incorporated in another jurisdiction. The fact is, anyone who visited your website and made comments there thought that they were making it on your website and targeting your audience, and therefore you are responsible. But we're not legally there yet. I'm just expecting that we will be legally there eventually, because it would be very counterintuitive otherwise. That's actually the legal liability issue that was imposed on Delphi actually creates, ironically, an incentive on website operators in Europe not to protect privacy and data of users. And I guess it's because it's a challenge for all of us how we balance different interests and assist everyone in being as helpful to each other's human rights as possible in the online environment.
I could just add that, I mean, it's not just anonymity versus Facebook real name. It's a middle ground, it's pseudonymity. You might very well have,
Well, with anonymity-wise, you can always just change the IP or their cookies or whatever and re-spam the same hateful comments. But while if you're authenticated, you can be blocked out. They can make it really hard for you to come back. Well, in Estonia, some of the newspapers actually at part want you to register with your ID card. They don't show your name, they just show a specific small code there. But when you definitely break the rules, they can block it and you can no longer comment. And that's one way of controlling the haters on the internet. But with the anonymous comments, you cannot stop them, no way, no how. So what's the solution for that? It's human nature.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also a free speech thing. I mean, not with allowing hateful
Yeah,
comments, but I mean,
imagine if the free speech goes directly to your family and they start touching the buttons.
No, my point is there are people who might want to comment online, but they don't actually want the real identity revealed because they might suffer problems if they do. Not because they're hateful, because maybe they have sexual orientation that's not allowed in a certain country, or things like this, or abuse victims, whatever.
So I think there's also a difference if you, like, again, it's the third-party issue as well. The problem with platforms like Discuss is that whether you want it or not, you're actually also sending information about what you're saying, to whom you're saying it, why you're saying that, to somebody who's in a jurisdiction that you can't touch. There's no way for anyone in Estonia to hold Discuss accountable, realistically.
But also isn't it the commenter's choice, because when he creates the account on Discuss, he probably just skips through all the legalese.
But I think it's not. I think when you're forcing a user to spend some 2 hours...
He doesn't have to comment on Discuss if he doesn't want to.
Right, but the user is not able to understand. I mean, we have this, in order to understand the normal privacy terms and services agreements online today, you have to be simultaneously a legal, technical, and sociological expert. We have no such individuals in the world. They have literally research teams that contain 5 to 10 individuals looking at each one of these agreements to figure out what kind of rights do they give to the company. The legal departments of many of these companies that create the contracts similarly are extremely large. So saying that a user makes a choice, I mean, maybe technically you're right, but in practice, actually it's not much of a choice because they aren't given a chance to understand what they're actually signing. And I think even when they click past the legalese, it's kind of like I say with this court development that I'm expecting, that users, regardless of whether they're logged in with Facebook or if they're logged in with Discuss or any other platform, when they make a comment on your news article, they expect you to be responsible somehow for the opportunity of commenting being there. And so I choose to be a bit agnostic about these. I like the idea of being able to anonymously comment, and I'm not personally very upset with anonymous haters. But I can see how that's a problem, and I think if you need to have an authentication method, it's very good to ensure that you are the only one that the user authenticates to, and that's simply also a matter of respect for even an anonymous hater, or a non-anonymous hater, as it would be in that case, that you give everyone, even people who say unthoughtful things, the means of understanding who they're interacting with, why, and what consequences that might have for them. And I think as we get more legal developments in the field of net hatred, then certainly it's going to also become more obvious to people who say spiteful comments online that they can be punished for it, especially if we have this authentication wave coming in. But then the question is, how do you make that authentication wave as privacy friendly as possible? And I cannot imagine that that wave would be selling all that data to marketeers on the other side of the Atlantic, or even in Germany or wherever. Germany has a strong advertisement industry as well, actually. So one should watch out.
It's also a way of using the technology. So on your side, how do you manage to get this, all of what we're talking right now is quite technical for many people out there who are just using the technology, like, not to say blindly, but how do you manage to reach those people? Like, how do you manage to educate them that, this is the technology, but you know how to use it and be careful with it when they have to?
Well, so I think a lot of the problems are actually in the platforms, that it's just very, very difficult to use the internet in a privacy-friendly way today. You can block cookies in your browser, sure, but then you can't use effectively most of the websites. You can block JavaScripts and ensure that nobody is making kind of scripting you into tracking or privacy violations, but then again, most websites will not actually function. In Sweden, I cannot visit my government without telling Google. The website actually does not work if I don't activate Google scripts. So I have to inform Google what I'm reading, when I'm reading it, how much I'm reading it, which files I'm downloading, and why. And they've just kind of built the website that way. I have no way of escaping this framework as a user. And because it's so difficult for end users to undertake measures to protect their privacy today, I think there's really a problem we're having with web development and with, in Sweden, the public sector procurement of web development services. Which again is why we're kind of trying to interface with municipalities and ensure that municipalities are given better tools to procure websites. I think it's also a question of perhaps core is a bad word, but lack of experience or kind of current competence in the web development sector. Like for this extreme antagonism against cookies, for instance. The fact of the matter is you're allowed to set cookies in every case where it matters. To remember a login, you're allowed to set it. You don't have to ask permission because the user requested it by logging in. And if the user requested the cookie, he accepted it, then you can set it. The same thing with like a session cookie. Normally, I think session cookies seem to me typically unnecessary, but you're allowed to set them because they can kind of have a functional application. The only thing you're not allowed to do according to the law is track people. And still a lot of web developers are fiercely antagonistic towards this anti-tracking legislation because nobody has taken the care to inform people what the law actually says and why it says that. And so before one reaches out too much to end users, I mean, a lot of end users do care about this, but they also face so many problems that you have this kind of resignation problem. I typically go back to my mom when I consider people who suffer from severe resignation problems with technology. She wants to protect her privacy. She even installed PGP keys. She's learned how to use limits. She does all of these things to protect her privacy and secure transactions and what have you. But she's just resigned because it's too difficult. It takes her too much time to understand what she needs to do to protect herself. And it's not feasible. She cannot live normally if she does everything she needs to do in order to be as secure and private as she wants to be. And this is why it's very important for us to build together platforms that make it more easy for people like my mom or even a lot of other people to live according to the spirit that the law gives them the right to.
Okay, thank you, but this is endlessly interesting discussion. It's going on forever, thank you, but we are out of time, and let's give a big thank you and applause to you.